Webinar 19, here we are. The New Zealand destination New Zealand. What are we going to call our webinar? My third time I asked that question. Cliff says target New Zealand. So whatever the name ends up to be, you know, maybe that's something we can ask a poll about. So anyway, we're here. We've got a great show for you. We've got, first up will be Monika, and just a quick intro to Monika. Her name is Warszawska, in case you want to know. It's close to Warsaw, if you want to add the Szawska at the end. So just to help you remember it, Monika Warszawska. She immigrated to New Zealand from Poland in 2010, and she's very familiar with the immigration process, as all of us are who went through it, and especially those of us that got intimate with the details involved. So she lives in Taranaki on the North Island. She enjoys the New Zealand lifestyle, as we all do, and she's been in practice for nearly 2 years now. So she enjoys her work, and she's got something to offer today, and we will soon be finding out about your employment rights. So we're all talking about getting work and complying with immigration, but how about when you actually work here? I think many of you will be surprised to hear that you actually have quite strong employee rights. In fact, I'm not sure if there's any difference at all to what I would have if I'm working in New Zealand. Well, when I'm working in New Zealand, I think it's exactly the same. I could be wrong, but let's talk to Monika about what those things are that you can expect when you land, when you get your job, and what it's like legally in terms of what status you have. Hi, Monika, are you around? Can I hear you?
Hello, everyone. Hello, Tate. Thank you for the nice introduction.
Okay, fine. So you've got something to share. Do you want to have a little bit of a chat about it? How did you first come across this? You can just share it any time you want to.
Okay, so I'm going to share my presentation, okay, and that hopefully will help everyone. And as we go through the PowerPoint presentation, I will be just talking about this. So let me just share, and hopefully it will be visible. So
there it is.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah.
Can I do this? I cannot put this in a big screen, like, I don't know how.
So
Okay.
I'm not going to touch my mouse, so you can use the mouse now, Monika.
Okay, so so I run my own business, New Zealand Immigration Connections, and I'm a licensed immigration advisor. And recently I have done a little course on Introduction to Your Employment Rights. And here is a link for you all. So it's employment.elearning.ac.nz/course. So we will just link that probably underneath the video. So this is a free course that everyone can do, and it explains the minimum rights for everyone who is employed in New Zealand. So migrants, New Zealand residents, citizens, so we all have those minimum rights in New Zealand. And let's just get started.
So what you're saying is that link is available online. I'll include it in the video, so in the text of the video, so people can access it just right there.
Yes, that's correct. Yes. So the minimum employment rights. So New Zealand have a very strong labor law, and as an employee, you have employment rights. An employer cannot offer you any less than those minimum rights, even if you are a migrant, okay? So as an employee, you have the right to be paid annual and public holidays, other paid leave such as sick, domestic violence, bereavement leave, rest and meals breaks, at least be paid the minimum wage, and have a written employment agreement document, and have a safe work environment. So let's just start to explain who is employee as a definition. So employee works for an employer, generally can be told what to do on the job or where and how to do it. Employee must have a written agreement So it's a document that I will talk a little bit later, a little bit more about a little bit later. An employee must be paid at least minimum wage. I'll talk about minimum wage a little bit later as well. Okay, so employment agreements. So this is very important, especially if you're dealing with your immigration process. So you will have to have that document. And so when you are offered a new job, you must be given a written employment agreement. And here are some things to remember. So you must have that written agreement, employment agreement. You must be given the chance and the time to get advice before you sign it, which me coming from Poland, I find it very interesting, and it's really good because that employment agreement, it's usually few pages document, and sometimes there might be information that you may not be familiar with. So it's always good to take that document with you home, read it in the evening, speak to your partner, or if you've got a good neighbor, speak to your lawyer, maybe accountant, a friend, just so you understand what you are signing for. This is very, very important, and this is a really good idea. So you cannot be forced to sign the agreement on the spot. So you always have the right to ask your employer, can I have some time to read it and get a legal advice, and I'll get back to you once I'm happy with that. Okay. The employment agreement must specify, and this is very important because Immigration New Zealand will be checking if those informations are included in the employment agreement. So they will be looking at the names of parties. So your name and the employer's name, description of the work. So what is your position, location of your work, so where the employer is likely to work. Is it going to be in Auckland? Is it going to be in a few locations? So that has to be said. Hours of work, how many hours are you going to be expected to work? And just information for you all. So the full-time employment in New Zealand is the minimum 30 hours per week. So this is what immigration will be also looking at, if this is a full-time employment or is it a part-time, less than 30 hours. So full-time employment is minimum 30 hours per week. And the pay, so is it going to be the wages? Are you going to be paid salary? Okay. And how the payment will be made. So will the employer is going to pay you by cash, check, or is it going to be done directly to your bank account? So that's very important. The other thing is important to have in your employment agreement is problem-solving process. So if something was to happen, how is it going to be resolved? Okay. Public holidays, employee will have to be paid time and a half for any time worked on a public holiday. We will talk a little bit more about public holidays. Employee protection. Okay, so what happens in case of restructure? So if the business will be closing down, what's going to happen? So you have to have that information in your agreement. And trial periods. So that applies to new employees, and this must be specified in your individual employment agreement. We'll talk about this a little bit later as well. You must also be paid at least the adult minimum wage, which is currently for adults $17.70, and this is per hour before tax. Okay, so moving forward, before you sign your employment agreement, you may find that it has a trial period. And so don't be surprised. This is usual New Zealand practice. This is what employers usually will put in the agreement. And you can only be employed on a trial period if all all of the following is true. So if you are a new employee, if the business has 19 or less employees, the trial period is for 90 days or less. So it cannot be more than 90 days. It has to be written in your employment agreement. So if it's not, you do not have trial period. And you have signed the employment agreement before you start the work. And the reason for that is to check if you can do the job. If you agree to a trial period, your employer can end your employment for no reason during the trial period, but they must give you the agreed amount of notice. So this is also what you are going to have in your agreement. So just keep an eye on that and just make sure, how many weeks do you have? Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Okay, so if something was to go wrong, so you know that you've got that time before you can finish with your employer. And in this case, you may not be able to pursue a personal grievance if something was to happen. So we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And this is a really nice topic, time off work. So New Zealand has a lot of time off in total. And there's quite a few public holidays. So we've got New Year's Day as a public holiday. Then in February, we've got Waitangi Day. Then we've got around Easter, we've got Good Friday, we've got Easter Monday, public holidays. Then in April, we have got Anzac Day. Then in June, Queen's Birthday. In October, Labor Day. And around Christmas, we've got Christmas Day and the Boxing Day. So that's quite a few days. And if you work on a public holiday, that is a day you normally work, you must get paid at least 1.5 times of your normal pay of rate. And you must be given another paid day off. So here in New Zealand, they call this day in lieu. So that's additional holidays for you, additional day that you can accumulate. If you work on a public holiday that is not a day you normally work, you must get paid at least 1.5 times your normal pay rate. In New Zealand, we also have annual holidays. So you may plan enjoying some of that, New Zealand work-life balance, after you start getting your 4 weeks holidays per year. If you would like to take some time off work, you can take annual holidays, also known as annual leave. What you have to do, so after 12 months with your employer, you have the right to at least 4 weeks annual holidays. When you leave your job, you must be paid for any annual holidays that you haven't used, which is really nice as well. So you're not going to lose any days. You must be paid for that. So if you are moving, to another employer or something has changed in your life, the employer has to pay you for that untaken holidays. You also have the right to take sick leave. And if you are feeling sick or you need to take some time off work, you can use those sick leave. So you've got the right to at least 5 days sick leave after you've been in your job for 6 months. So this is the minimum. The employer can always offer you more, but those are the minimum employment rights. And sick leave is paid time off work when you are sick or injured. So if something happened to you, you can take time off work and you will be paid for that. You can also use your sick leave if your child, partner, or someone who depends on you is sick and you need to be with them. And here, when you are leaving your job, you do not get paid for unused sick leave. And just a little bit of advice, just do not take advantage of that. In some situations, employers may put a clause in your individual employment agreement that they may have the right to ask you for a medical certificate if you are absent from work for more than 2 or 3 days. So be prepared for that as well, because they may not believe maybe that you are sick. You may be doing something else. So they may have the right to ask you for the medical certificate to make sure that you are actually sick. But it's also good to know that you can take that time if you are really not well. Moving on. So sometimes when someone close to you dies, after you have been in your job for 6 months, you may have the right to paid time off, and this is called bereavement leave. So you can have 3 days bereavement leave for the death of your husband, wife, or partner, parent or grandparent, child or grandchild, brother or sister, husbands, wives, or partners' parents, so like very close family. However, you can also have at least 1 day bereavement leave for the death of someone else that you and your employer agree was close to you. So, for example, that could be your cousin, maybe auntie, you know, maybe some close friend, but you need to discuss that with your employer. And this is also really, really good to have, especially we all are migrants, and if we have to travel so far, always those 3 days is good to have. Here we're going to talk about this domestic violence. Well, hopefully it's not going to be a problem with immigrant families, but if you have been affected by domestic violence and you need to take some time off, you can take domestic violence leave. So you will have to meet those conditions. So you have to be in a job for at least 6 months, and then you will have the right to take up to 10 days per year of paid domestic leave. You may also ask for a short-term change to your hours, locations, and duties of works, and your employer must consider it quickly. So they will have to decide within 10 working days. And here we have provided a link for New Zealand Family Violence website that you can find some really good helplines, phone numbers, emergency services that you can get in touch. And they are really good, and they keep things confidential. It's not something that we are proud of. It may happen, and it's always good to know that you are not on your own. You have a help. There's always someone who will be able to assist you with that. So just maybe have a look at that website and see what organizations, if you maybe know of someone who may need some help. So that might be helpful as well. Parental leave. So that might be really relevant to young families who are coming over to New Zealand. So if you are having a baby, or you are going to look after a child under 6, you may have the right to take time off work to care for your new child. And this is called parental leave. And in order to get it, you must meet certain conditions as well. So, so the parental leave and paid parental leave will depend on how long you have been employed, and if you are the primary or secondary carer for the child. The maximum leave you can get is 22 weeks parental leave payment and 52 weeks unpaid extended leave. So this is really good to know. So you've got that right, that when you have the baby, you've got those weeks to look after the baby and maybe arrange, someone to look after it after that 22nd week. So that's really, really good as well. And to get the parental leave, you must have worked for the same employer for a minimum 6 months for at least an average 10 hours a week. So, so that's not too bad. And yeah, it's good to know that you've got the right for a parental leave too. Okay, so rest and meal breaks. In your everyday job, you are entitled to have rests and meal breaks. And if once you have worked more than 2 hours in a shift, you are entitled to breaks. So for example, if you work for more than 6 hours and up to 10 hours in one day, you must get 2 10-minute paid rest breaks. Some employers may give you more, may give you 15 minutes or a little bit more, but those are the minimum. So you've got the right to have 2 10-minute paid rest breaks and 1 30-minute unpaid meal break. So you can leave your workplace, you can go to the park, have a lunch, not think about work, just really have a break. And when you take those breaks, it's usually depends, you agree with your employer how this works, because for everyone it will be different. So if you are a teacher, it's usually everyone has at the same time breaks, but if you're working at the retail, someone has to be in a shop, so that will have to be arranged with the employer. Sometimes what may happen is that you may be fired or made redundant. So there should be a clause of redundancy. There could be a clause of redundancy in your agreement. So just check that one as well. So if that happens to you, your employer must act in a good faith. So have a good reason and follow a proper process before you can be fired or made redundant. So, so if you are fired, it's usually because something really bad happened, and usually you would get some warnings by the employer. And if you, so this is that process that the employer will have to follow, okay? And if the employer does not follow the process, you may be able to raise a personal grievance against them. So it's also the same, like you will have to have some record that you've been trying, to communicate with the employer, and just keep that record as well. So you may send an email, you might try to talk to the employer, and if that doesn't help, you've got already that record, then you can take it to employment tribunal. Only in cases of serious misconduct can your employer fire you without notice. So I have provided you the website of the employment.govt.nz, and you can have a look at some how to resolve problems and what could be seen as a misconduct and serious misconduct. So serious misconduct, it could be violent behavior, it could be bullying, harassment, theft or fraud, dishonesty, use of illegal drugs at work. So if your employer has seen that something like that is happening, they can fire you without a notice. Okay, and I also have provided, so this is all employment.govt.nz websites that you can find and read more about dismissals, ending your employment sections, and what are those misconducts and serious misconducts reasons when the employer can fire you without a notice. So they are really good websites and very helpful to follow and to understand. So just go there and have a look. If you've got any questions, you can always ask, and we're happy to answer them. Safety is taken very seriously by the New Zealand government and also by most companies, and you are also expected to obey all New Zealand laws plus best practices told by your employer. You have the right to work in a safe workplace, and your employer must give you the proper training, supervision, and safety gear you need to do your work. You must take care of your own health and safety and take reasonable care that others are not harmed by something you do or don't do. So if you are let's say, a digger driver and you're working on a digger, you always have to care about other people who you are working with and people who are around you, because that safety is very, very important in the workplaces here in New Zealand. You always must follow health and safety instructions from your employer. And I'm sure before you start your work, the employer will go through some important informations and explain the health and safety instructions that apply in that with that employer, what to do, what not to do, what to be aware. If you see some hazard, who do you have to report to, and yeah, all those things. Okay, so that's very this is also taken very seriously by New Zealand government, and any major breach of law will be looked at for some severe punishment. So unfortunately, some employers know that certain workers can be afraid to report exploitation at work, especially if they are migrants who are working when their visa doesn't allow them to work, working at the hostel in exchange for accommodation, boarding in New Zealand unlawfully because their visa has expired, working outside of their visa conditions, worried that they will lose their job, and this is the really big one, worried that they will have to leave New Zealand. Unfortunately, some employers use this fear to take away your rights, and this is wrong. So we've got department, Minister of Business, Innovations and Employment, and if something like that is happening, you report to them because they want to stop employers from exploiting workers, including migrants, and want you to report an exploitation at work. And if you're a migrant, you may be able to stay. If that situation is happening to you, you may be able to stay in New Zealand while the department investigate and prosecute your employer. The department may let you complete your visit. This may happen if you've been working without a visa or outside of visa conditions. I have provided some contact details, so like a call center 0800 number, that if you know of any worker exploitation, you could call them. You could also go on the employment.govt.nz website, and under contact us section, you could fill the form and report that. What is also really good that you could also give anonymous information to Crime Stoppers by phoning them on 0800 number, or you could also use the anonymous online form, which is really good. So if you are afraid, you are worried that something might bad happen to you, you still have the right to fill the form, and this is going to be as anonymous online form, so there won't be any names, but still, if that happens to you, I would still advise that you contact them, you speak to someone, because that is not a good practice of your employer. And do you really want to work in that environment? Do you think that your employer will change? No, it's not going to change. So that is why it is very important to report them. So then the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, they can deal with that. So yeah, so that's also really, really good to know that this is available, because unfortunately that sometimes happens and it's not right. This is wrong. So here I have provided some contact to Employment New Zealand, so you can contact them by their website, employment.govt.nz. You can check them on Facebook. They also have a LinkedIn profile. They have a free number, 0800, so you could give them a call, or you could also send them an email and in that way communicate with them. Okay, so yeah, that is all. I would like to thank you for your time, and I hope that this was helpful to you. If you have any questions, I refer you to that Employment New Zealand website, where hopefully you can find more answers to your questions. Maybe contact them directly, and they will be able to assist you. They will be able to guide you and hopefully help. If you've got any immigration questions, just get in touch with me. I'll be happy to assist and answer your questions as well. So that was my presentation. Tate, any other people? Do you guys have any questions?
You brought up when you were talking, Monika, about Poland as something about, and I wonder how many countries out there sit you down and expect you to sign something right away. Is that what they expect you in Poland? Do they just give a paper and say, here's the employment agreement, sign that? They expect, like, don't leave, just sign. They're just, you know, like they're looking at their watch or something?
Well, like I said, I migrated to New Zealand in 2010, so it's over 9 years ago. But when I used to work, this is what it was. That was the normal standard practice. They would put a document in front of you, and you don't understand what you're signing. There's lots of legal information. So it's like, what is this? And the people in the HR department are busy, so they'll just go quickly through the document, say, oh, this is just a standard practice, and just a standard agreement, sign it. So that was really interesting for me to know that in New Zealand, I can take the document home, I can read it, you know, quietly, consult with my lawyer, accountant, or neighbor, or a friend, partner. So that was really, really good.
I wonder how South African employment law addresses that issue. And the problem-solving process is something else you brought up, and that's an important thing. I mean, some of these things will affect everyone. Some of these things obviously won't affect hardly anyone. But the problem-solving thing is really good to know. That's just in case you feel like you're being abused in some way. You know, it doesn't have to be like extreme case. It can be just you believe you deserve some commission because of something that you did, but for some reason you didn't get it, and the excuse doesn't sound reasonable to you. So what's the process to solve a problem, right? These are things that you're going to come up against probably. I mean, hopefully not, but a lot of you will. I mean, I certainly have in 10 years working here.
So first, I would just advise, try to talk to your employer, try to make the time and ask them that you would like to make appointment with them and talk about this issue, what's happening. Just make sure that this is within that 90 days. So you cannot claim something that happened 4 or 5 months ago and you suddenly decided that you want to talk that this has happened. So it's best to resolve those problems as soon as. So try to contact your boss. If you're a teacher, go to your principal. If the principal doesn't want to talk to you, finds all the excuses, maybe talk to the deputy principal. Also keep the record. So maybe just send an email and just explain what you wanted to talk about, because that's very important to keep that record of the communication, because that may, you know, if you will have to go to the tribunal employment and if you have to use it, it's really hard, and I don't wish it to anyone, but you always have to think for the future. So it's also good to have that in writing.
Yeah, employers also
Yeah.
Employers also don't want to go to the tribunal.
No, so hopefully they will try to resolve the problem within the business, not taking this outside, because it's not a good practice for them as well. So just try as best as you can, phone them, email them, maybe go through the secretary, personal assistant, and just keep the record for yourself, that this is when I tried, this is what's happened. If you cannot speak to the employer that you've got, maybe your supervisor, maybe go to another supervisor, maybe go beyond them, because if you really cannot communicate with that person, just try to find someone else who's got a similar position.
And then here we have some of these. This is from your link, right? They got all these different things to call. If there's an elder abuse, look at that, family violence. I mean, that's not going to happen. But if it does happen, there is help, and it will stop, because New Zealand law is quite tough. It will stop. You won't have that problem here. And here's another one, just suicide thoughts. There's 3 different places for that in Little New Zealand. And it actually does work. I've heard through, listen to me. I've heard through someone else, no, really. I heard through someone else that they're actually quite caring and considerate and professional. So, and then here's another one, just drug and alcohol help and all that. So there's help for everything. And on average, I think you'll find they're quite good at what they do. So, I mean, if you have a legal problem, that's going to cost money probably, but there is initial even support in that area.
Maybe if you're a union member, you could discuss that with your union representative. So that could be also an option.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you, Monika, for delivering that. You've had some thank yous from other people as well in the chat, you might have seen. Oh, here we go. In South Africa, written contracts. Thanks, Stephanie. A verbal contract is acceptable. Right, is acceptable. So then, what did you say? Oh, you said this. No, I didn't. I said that. Oh, no, that's no fun. Thank you for that. That's quite interesting. A verbal contract is acceptable. Not here. You have to have a written contract. And actually, you need a written contract anyway. So it's quite good, because you need that to go through, the next stages.
Yeah, well, in New Zealand, sometimes it may happen that the employer will not give you employment agreement. So you will be still working according to those minimum employment rights. However, we are here all as migrants. So to meet immigration criteria, you will have to have that document. So just...
Oh, so sometimes you don't get it, Monika?
It did happen to me that in the past, so I worked in New Zealand for different employers,